Hey, g'day guys, it's Adam from VideoShowMeHow, and in this video, a little bit different, we're going to be talking through basically how to pick a solar panel. So depending on the setup that you're looking to put a panel on, whether that be your four-wheel drive, your caravan, your camper trailer, your rooftop tent, whatever it is, today we're going to be exploring a few different rigid panels and different types of panels and do some testing along the way with some live readouts. It's about midday on the weekend, so we've got pretty much peak sun. We're going to be running these three panels through their paces. We've got the new one here from Renogy. This is their ShadowFlux. We've got their standard high output panel and even an eBay special over there, which is worryingly rated the same as these. So we're going to talk through all of those. We're going to do a bunch of testing. If you're looking to see what outputs that different panels will give you, and particularly ones that are designed for shade, this is the video for you. So without further ado, let's get started. Right, so if we get stuck into our sort of testing criteria so we can cover that off, we do have three different panels here. This is the new one from Renogy. It is their ShadowFlux 200 watt panel. Pretty excited to test this one because it is designed for shade. So we're going to do some testing to see how that performs. We have one of their high output panels here. This is another 200 watt panel from them, but without that ShadowFlux technology. So we'll see the differences there. And then this guy. Now, I ordered this specifically for this video so I could do some light for light type comparisons here for you guys. And this, if you would believe, is rated as a 200 watt panel. I'm not making that up. There it is, 200 watt. Now, obviously, that is an absolute joke, and that is not possible. I wasn't even going to include it, but I thought I would, and we'll do some testing on this guy as well because this is the cheapest of the cheap panel. But I thought I'd include it because that is a very real, I guess, risk of buying those generics is you pull the trigger on something like that. It's rated at 200 watts, but you'll see the output, and clearly is not going to be anywhere near it. So as far as testing and getting things set up as well, we have our handy dandy can here. Solar panels are all about peak irradiance or peak irradiance, potato, tomato, depending on how you pronounce things, but this is all about how that sun angle hits those panels. Whether you're in winter, whether you're in summer, all of those things are a factor, right? Whether you've got it sitting on the top of your roof rack, for example, like this guy here, just nice and flat there. The angle is super important as well as that peak irradiance from the sun. A good way to test these is just with something cylindrical like this, and if you're putting it on there, what you shouldn't see is much shadow around the can itself. I've already aligned these up so you can kind of see we don't have, you know, any of this sort of stuff going on where there'd be a big shadow front, back, side to side. So that's kind of a good way to get the panel lined up in that perfect position to the old big yellow ball in the sky there, so you can kind of get, you know, your ideal numbers out of it. And we'll probably start down this end as far as the setup of them as we progress through to the newer technology on the end. So like I said, no holes barred, no BS. I'd ordered this as a full 200 expecting a basic version of one of these. I'll show you the listing here on the screen. There it is. We looked at it there before. It is rated at 200 watts. If we have a look though at the actual cell makeup, you can see we have the individual cells, and then these little silver bits in the middle are the bus bars. So that's kind of like these are soaking up all the juice from the rays. The bus bars are then pulling that power away down in the strip to then combine to give your output. You can see how many bus bars we have per cell. Very, very limited, particularly when we start comparing to one of these guys. So this is one of Renogy's 200 panels. This is their high output, but not their ShadowFlux. We'll have a look at the differences there in a sec. You can see much larger cells, the size you'd like to see if you're looking for a full 200 watt type panel. You'll see that in the output here in a minute as well. Bus bars much tighter together and much more of them. Next guy over here is their latest and greatest, and this is their ShadowFlux panel that takes the way that these bus bars are wired together to the next level. And with the trickery in the way that they've completed the wiring here, you'll see that when you are covering some of these cells up, your output sometimes barely even gets touched. As far as picking these, you've got to remember that even on the car driving through, it's not about the peak sun, it's about the sun total, this total amount of energy that your panels are grabbing over the course of a whole day. So you've got to consider over the course of that whole day, if you are driving around, how much time are you driving in full sun? Are you driving through an area that does have a bunch of shade? If it is on the top of a caravan, for example, or your camper trailer, or you parked at camp, are you going to be parking in full sun the whole time? Or are you going to be in a scenario where maybe you've got a little bit of shade? So that's something that I'd recommend, is considering not just the peak number, but actually what it looks like over the course of a whole day, because that's what's going to count. That's what's going to fully recharge your battery bank so that you're ready to rock and roll, keeping those beers cold and everything else. So from here, I reckon let's start plugging things in. Let's start checking out what our peak outputs are. Then let's start covering some panels up to see what the difference it makes and how much of an impact shade has. And also we'll throw a branch over the top here as well to sort of simulate that real world example and see what kind of difference it makes. Right, so let's start with our 200 watt panel. We'll plug these guys in, still in the peak angle, and if we whiz on around, we can see on the screen here, but then also I've got this set up with the Bluetooth off the back of our panel. There we go, we're starting to pick up some juice there. The MPPT will start moving around just to see where it can get the peak power from. So you'll see that settle down in just a second, but you can see we are nowhere near what this panel is purporting to be. Our voltage, you can see there, if we come into here, into our solar auxiliary there, we can see our voltage here is sort of getting up to about that 20 odd mark. So that part seems to be reasonably okay. I know we're settling down a little bit now, but obviously output at 40 watts, we are nowhere near it. I would say that panel is more of a 50 watt style panel. So we'll reg to that anyway. We'll chalk that up to our peak number. Now let's move on to the Renogy 200 watt. Let's plug that guy in. So we've just plugged in our center panel here. This is our 200 Renogy, not the ShadowFlux, just the regular one. We can see in here, we're already starting to warm up. By the looks of that, we're a higher voltage here as well, which helps as far as our cabling sizes and what have you. Well, it looks like we're pretty well locking on. So what are we getting there? We're getting about 174 by the looks, 175. So that's looking pretty good. That's probably what I'd expect today. As far as output goes, we've locked in there. We're pretty consistent at that 174 by the looks of things. So next one, let's do the same now for our new Renogy ShadowFlux. See what the peak output of that is, and then let's move on to some stick testing, some shade testing, where we cover up some of these panels to start simulating that sort of shade environment and see what the output drops to. Right, so ShadowFlux all plugged in. This is the brand newie, the new version. Same sort of voltage. It is a much higher voltage panel as well. We're up at about that 30 volt mark. We're still flipping around, finding the maximum output as far as our MPPT controller goes. So we're flipping around there. We're already up to about 165 there. We'll wait till it locks in. Now, it looks like we're pretty well there. 169. Looks like we're pretty well there, sitting at about that 30 volt mark. Off the back of that, we can probably see that we're getting ever so slightly less peak power from the ShadowFlux in comparison to their high output. Obviously this guy down there, it's not even really worth talking about, but worth a comparison. If we sort of extrapolate that out, I reckon that's a 50 watt panel. I would hope it's a 50 watt panel, you gods. Maybe, I don't know, let me know what you guys reckon. What is that actually? Let me know in the comments. But there you go, that's sort of our peak output. So from a decent branded panel, you should be expecting at least kind of that, and you'll see that peak right up to its full 200, depending on that, you know, that irradiance and where you are in the world, that sort of stuff. Next step though is kind of the real world stuff. Peak numbers are great. Let's see what happens when we start covering up some of these cells. So how are we going to do this? We'll start down here again, work our way across. We'll keep a bit of a tally as we go, and I'm going to cover a single cell. So just literally with the old blue glove there, we'll cover up just a single cell, just a little bit like that. Same on each of these, and we'll see what those numbers drop to. We're then going to do an arm and just literally whack it the whole arm over, and then we're going to get my simulated branch, and we're going to put it diagonally across the entire panel, and we'll see what our differences are between the different panels. I'm particularly interested to see the outputs from this Renogy ShadowFlux. So we're plugged back into our eBay special. We've reached our peak power output there of the enormous 40 watts. Now let's see what happens. Oh, it's already faffing around a little bit. No, we're stable there. Let's see what happens when we cover one of these panels. So I'm just literally covering just a single panel. Look at that. So we've gone from 40, 10. It's getting about 10. I'll make sure I'm not cheating here. We're just over one panel. And In fact, what's happened there? That's not even... That dropped to absolutely nothing there for a minute. We're coming back slowly. Oh, there we go. If we kill that again, see what happens. I'm trying to be fair here. We're just doing a single cell there. You can see that is pretty dramatic as far as how much power we lose. And if we try and zoom out here, we're covering just a single one of these panels. That gives you an idea that some of the cheaper panels just aren't wired to cope at all with any sort of these cells covered at all. Covering just a single out of all of these, that's I mean, you may as well not have it plugged in. 10 watts barely charges your phone. Now, if we go to our arm test, and I just throw the arm over there, it's about the same by the looks. So, I mean, it's still awful, but it gives you an idea. And if we do our little stick where we just literally go 45 degrees over the whole lot, you can see there that we're still halving the output there by the looks of that. So gives you a bit of an idea of its performance in shade. Now let's go across to a high quality panel, but one that doesn't have the ShadowFlux. Let's see how this one goes. Right, so we've just plugged in. We'll just have to wait for the MPPT to kick in again. You can see we're already jumping right up. We'll wait till that's stable. We'll wait till it's locked in. So there we go. It looks like we're nice and solid there. We're at about 175 watts, similar to what we were before. Now, let's cover one of these panels. What happens? Well, we're dropping down to about the 50 watt mark. So we're about a third-ish about that we're losing straight up there. That's for a full cell delete, if you will. So there we go. Yeah, about that 55 mark. I'll try and cover the whole thing. So there we go. That gives you a bit of an idea there now. Now, in the next one, we need to do our arm test. Obviously, I can't get the full arm. That gives you a bit of an idea, though, across the full panel or the full arm. Very similar there again. Bus bars all working together to give us our output. Now, if we do our sort of simulated stick test across the whole thing, different. There you go. Different. We're not quite halving there. Obviously, we're covering a bunch more cells, but they're probably a little bit more realistic. But there you go. So we're dropping down to about that 100 mark on the standard style of panel. So next guy, let's have a crack at this ShadowFlux. It's designed for shadow, so let's see what kind of difference it makes. So plugged in here to our ShadowFlux. Same story. We'll just wait till it picks up the maximum output here on the MPPT charger. And this sort of stuff is definitely one of the benefits of having a setup that gives you the ability. That's why I like that Victron gears, because I mean, you don't need all this fancy screen and everything, but certainly on the app, like you can see here, that's just so handy. Because if you were using just a PWM or just one of those controllers with the blinky lights, you'd have no idea. You'd buy something like that over here and you'd be like, oh yeah, 200 watts, I guess I'm getting 200 watts, and then you'd run why your battery never charges, because you can't kind of see the analytics. But anyway, that's why I recommend you got to have something that actually tells you the real output, because that can sometimes make all the difference. Right, so it looks like we're peaked out there. We're about the 170 odd mark. Let's do our hand test. Wow, whoa, hang on a minute. I'm just confirming that. Look at that. That is crazy. Just like this is no BS. I haven't actually done this yet, so I'm in the same boat you are. I'm trying to be as fair as possible. Look at that. That is incredible. That's genuinely pretty awesome. We've lost a grand total of 5 watts out of 170. When we saw on this guy, which is still a high quality panel, you can see that the actual peak output on this guy is slightly higher than this one, even though they're both 200. In full sun by a couple of watts. This guy we probably don't need to talk about, but that's wild. That is wild. We'll wait for it to get to peak again. 171. That is crazy. That's actually genuinely crazy. That is wild. I'm covering, what happens if we cover 2? Even if we cover 2, what did that go down to? I mean, look at that. That's crazy. I'm blown away by that. There you go. So that, I mean, I know I'm not fully covering it, but you know, my hand's not that big. But there you go. That's wild. We do the old arm test. I know, same sort of I don't know how I'm going to get that. Dropping down to about 100, still pretty good. Still pretty good. If we jag our little stick test, our simulated stick test anyway, and we'll do our corner to corner scenario again. Same story, corner to corner. So there we go. Looks like we're only dropping down to, we'll go full power mode, 171. Now this is obviously extreme, fully covering your panel from end to end like that, from corner to corner. We're dropping down to about the 118, 119 mark. All right, so results time. And if we have a bit of a look, we can see here we've split everything out across our peak power rating. And that, of course, you just got to bear in mind that it's going to depend on where you are in the world, you know, what your climate's looking like. We shot this on the weekend, 25-degree day. It was midday. It's coming into winter where I am here at the time of shooting this video. We had full blue sky and clear sun. So you may get more. I've seen these panels, certainly two Renogy ones, get the full 200. The eBay one didn't last that long. But you may get slightly less as well, depending on if you're in the dead of winter, all of that sort of stuff, super low scan, all that sort of stuff. You can research all of that. But check it out. Here's the full results that you saw through the whole video here and all the testing. You can see from a peak power, bearing in mind, of course, that's not the most important thing because you're looking for that power over the course of the whole day, but you can see the Type N panel took the prize on the day as far as the peak output there at about 88%. The ShadowFlux coming in a very close second there at 85%. The eBay one, we're probably not going to talk about a whole lot in this part, to be fair. We can see it in the data. It's nowhere near the 200. I reckon my bet's that it's a 50-watt panel, but I don't know. Looking at these figures, what do you reckon for the seasoned solar panel veterans out there? Let me know in the comments. What's your bet? What do you reckon that actually is? If we keep progressing across, though, we had our hugely, very impressively scientific tests that we did, which was we covered one cell, we did a bit of an arm cover, and then we did a stick cover. Of course, mileage may vary depending on your location, but we can see this is where that ShadowFlux comes into its own, because I'm still actually quite, even in, you know, editing this video together and having to play with it, that is seriously impressive for it to only lose that tiny portion when it started having some cells covered. And like you saw, we even did the double cell for it to reduce, you know, just a little bit more. So big winner there for the ShadowFlux. We can see 165% or 83% of its total rating compared to 25% in a similar vein for the Type N. And bearing in mind, I have to underline, I've got another one of those Type Ns. That's that 100-watt panel that sits on top of the D-Max, and I researched the heck out of that thing to make sure I had the best I could find. So that's a big boy version, one of those. So that is still a very high quality panel. Nothing taken away from it, but you can just see how much of an impact that ShadowFlux technology makes. So pretty impressive. Even with the arm coverage, we're still double the output of the N panel. And then with that stick cover, we've still got a healthy sort of 19 watts on top, an extra 10% on top of that as well. So there you go. That's a bit of an overview of the ratings. Feel free to pause the video and check that out in a little bit more detail. What do you think? Let me know in the comments for those scenarios we were talking about at the start of the video. If you're looking to get maximum output for or across the entirety of a day, of a full sun day, getting that energy back into your battery bank, I mean, that sort of speaks for itself. That is pretty good. So that's all for this one, guys. As always, I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.